Unit 2, Topic E, Manipulate Table Data. We're going to look now at how to manipulate the data in a table instead of the table itself. And for this purpose, I've opened our Northwind sample database, and we're looking at the table objects on the left. And let's have a look at the customers table. Now, to manipulate the data inside of a table is not usually a good idea. When we go into more sophisticated database design, we'll see that the best way to manipulate the data in a database is either through a form or through a query, because in forms and queries we are able to define data validation rules which would guard against accidentally changing important data or deleting data or changing the data in such a way that it becomes invalid. However, it is entirely possible and not always a bad idea to manipulate data inside of a table itself. So here we have a customer table, and it has an ID field which we'll talk about later, but then it has different fields for the company name, the last name, the first name, an email address, a job title for the customer, etc. And this database has an extensive example of all the different fields that can be associated with something like a customer. Now, to manipulate data inside the table could be quite simple. For instance, if somebody wants to just change the name or the surname or a job title, it's a matter of clicking inside that particular data entity and simply overwriting it. So let's say Francisco's last name is not Perez Oleata any longer, but Smith. I can simply type Smith in there and change it. Now you will ask me, so when do I save? Why is there not a save button like there would be in Word or Excel? And the answer is that in Access, when you change something, when you change any data entity in a record, the moment that the change is effected, the whole database is immediately updated. But while you're still in the record, notice on the left-hand side of the record identifier there is a little pencil that tells you that you're still editing, that you haven't finally captured whatever you're doing. And you will continue editing until you reach another record. So the moment I click away from this record, navigate away from it in any way, whatever I'm doing there has now been confirmed. I don't need to save anything. The change is already immediately committed into the data structure of the database the moment you make the change, except if you stay in the record. So be very careful. If I am doing any editing, you'll notice the little pencil appearing on the on the record identifier on the left hand side, and that little pencil will stay there until either I press escape, which means I'm cancelling the operation, or if I am editing and I'm making a change, I commit the change by either pressing enter and navigating away from the record. And the moment I navigate away from a record, the record is committed into the database and there's no need to save. You'll notice that there is no such thing as a save button, which we typically would use in Excel or in Word. All changes are committed immediately, and that way the database keeps itself up to date. Remember that you can save the database, but while you're manipulating data inside of a table, you don't need to continually save the table, because the data is continually being updated in the database. So you can edit a record inside of a table by simply clicking in any of the data entities and changing it. You can also edit data by inserting a new record. So when we look at this table, I want you to see at the bottom of the table here is a record navigator, where we can navigate between different records by simply choosing a record, or using the back and forth buttons to navigate up and down between the different records. And then there's, importantly, on the right hand side of the record navigator, there's a new blank record button. So if I click that, I'm able to manipulate the table data by adding a new record. So if I go and add a new company, I can call it company DD, and I can add a new record this way, and so forth. I'm not going to complete this operation, but notice that the record is not committed until I click away from it to commit it. The new record can also be deleted. So if I want to delete an entire record, I can simply select the record on the left on the record selector, and then right click with my mouse, click delete record, and a record will be deleted. Now, Microsoft Access has all sorts of controls that are or could be built into the database to make sure that you don't accidentally delete something important. And this is one of them. It says you're about to delete the record, and if you do that, understand that you don't get it back. So if I click yes now, that record is done. That's one of the drawbacks of a database such as this one, is that there are not multiple levels of undo like you would have in Access. I beg your pardon, let's revert. There are not multiple levels of undo as you would find in Excel or in Word. Once you've deleted a record and committed that delete, typically it is gone, and although there might be some way of getting it back, I would not bargain on it if I were a typical user. So remember that when you delete data, any data from a table, those deletes are committed to the database immediately, and the chances of getting them back are typically slim. So be careful with deleting records. So you can insert a new record, you can delete a new record. Now you would say, why can't I insert a new record in the middle? And it's quite possible you can, but it doesn't really matter. Typically the place for inserting new records would be right at the bottom of the table, because the order of records don't really matter. And the reason why it doesn't matter is we can manipulate the data by doing typical Excel operations on the data, like sorting and filtering, and doing all sorts of advanced sorts and filters. So understand that the way that the data is represented in the table itself does not really matter, because the way that the data will be represented ultimately would be in a form or a report, and there in the report or the form is where typically we manipulate the format and make it look attractive. So don't try and make data look attractive in a table. The table is simply the base storage for the data, and not the way that it will be ultimately represented. Right at the bottom is a little star on the record selector, and that little star simply indicates that this is where you can begin typing a new record. So instead of using the record navigator to insert, another way of doing it is simply typing. So you can easily add a new record by simply typing the new record data in, and I'm not going to complete that. If I now press escape, remember that because the record has not been committed, I cancel what I've done. So escape is a very useful key on the keyboard for you to use to cancel any changes that you've made inside of a table. End of topic E.